I was the minister for post-secondary education, and we've certainly seen the rise of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred on campuses. I pointed out this next generation, the 18 to 34-year-olds, the data is showing us that they don't understand the history of Jews, the history of persecution. They don't understand the Holocaust. And they don't understand that after the Holocaust, Israel was given to Jews. It was a crappy piece of land with nothing on it. That was all it took, and it became a firestorm, as you described in your opening comments, Yasmine.
And this was happening after October 7th, when the anti-Semitism in Canada had gone up by something astronomical, like 670%.
And then 72 hours later, he was telling me that I had to resign, and I refused, and he fired me because of the firestorm, not because of what I said. But Jews here get targeted. We don't make any military decisions. We don't make any policy decisions. We don't elect in those, we didn't elect Netanyahu. But somehow we are held to blame for military and policy decisions made by a foreign government.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Today, we have an incredibly brave woman with us who I am very grateful has agreed to come onto my podcast to tell us her story. Selina Robinson is a Canadian politician and author of this book, Truth Be Told, that we're going to be talking about today. So, Selina has a very interesting story. As a Canadian politician, we're going to speak to you guys a little bit about the background of the different kinds of parties that we have here. But the party that she was a part of is the most left party that we have here in Canada. And Selina was in a podcast or in a webinar discussion, which was completely separate. It was B'nai B'rith Canada. And in that webinar, she referred to the territory in which Israel now stands as a crappy piece of land. This is not controversial. Many other people have said the same thing. In fact, Selina's got some great quotes from Mark Twain in her book, which are a lot more descriptive, and crappy piece of land ends up sounding almost utopian compared to the way he described it. But because of these 5 words, she suddenly became in the middle of an absolute firestorm. She was attacked by activists and a group of Muslim clergy specifically who were demanding her resignation. She was subjected to online harassment, including credible death threats, and her constituency office was vandalized with anti-Semitic graffiti. Selina was consequently fired from BC's cabinet and was told she could not continue with her responsibilities due to the depth of work she had to do to repair the harm caused by her comments. But as you'll hear in our conversation today, it was very difficult for anyone to pinpoint what was the harm that was caused by these comments. Selina, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me, Yasmine.
So let's start at the beginning, just to give people a little bit of a background of our 3 main parties. We can ignore the other one. So just, I think that people don't really understand our politics in Canada as far as, they're used to America with like
Right.
very right wing, very left wing. But tell us a little bit about our 3 main parties here in Canada.
So we have 3 main federal parties. We have the Conservative Party, which is perhaps I would describe as the most right, Liberal Party, which seems to sit in the middle. Some would argue left of center, and then New Democrats. They are on the left. Our politics compared to the U.S. They are very, very different. We also have a Green Party and we have other right-wing parties, but provincially we are also limited to 2 really distinct parties. Yes, there's a Green Party, but the BC New Democrats is related to the federal party, but it's also very different. It has a different sort of structure and it has different areas of responsibility. And I was a member of the BC New Democrats because it is the party of best fit. There's no such thing as a perfect party. I talk about that in my book. And that's where I decided I could make the most difference was by joining the BC New Democrats in 2012. And that's when I ran for election in the 2013 election.
Hmm. And the New Democratic Party generally is what we would consider to be the most progressive. So you would expect that they would be the ones who are most vocal against racism, anti-Semitism, bigotry,
For sure.
discrimination against LGBT, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, So let's talk about now that we've kind of situated you, people understand the party that you're a part of and what their platform is, what are the things that they believe in very strongly. Supposedly, they would be the party that would be against anti-Semitism. But tell us what happened when you referred to the land that Israel stands as a crappy piece of land.
So I think, Yasmin, it's important to understand how I was situated in my party. I'm a
Yeah,
Jewish person. I've never
that's
hidden
right.
that. I've never hidden that. I was, and I call myself the Jew in the crew. I was the one
That's
who was the liaison to the Jewish community. I was tasked with helping some of my colleagues who represented areas where there's Jewish pockets of population, facilitate relationship with the local synagogue. I was the one who was asked to review speaking notes at Holocaust remembrance events or Hanukkah candlelighting events. I was asked to review ads that were going into the one Jewish newspaper that we have to make sure that it hit the right tone, delivered the right message. I was an asset, and I was asked to be the Jew in the crew, to represent and to make sure that as a government, that we were doing right by the Jewish community. And I was honored to take on that role. And I understand why, because there were some oopses that I caught. And I know that people were grateful that I did that. There was no ill intent meant by their oopses, but they used me to help make sure that they did right by the Jewish community. So you fast forward to October 7th, because I think the massacre that happened on October 7th certainly set the stage for creating a schism, certainly for with New Democrats, some of whom historically had suggested that Israel was a somehow a corrupt institution, that it had no right to exist as a state. And that, I mean, I had heard those things, but they were not issues that were front and center, certainly not among BC New Democrats. BC New Democrats are responsible for provincial activities, healthcare, education, and not commenting on international conflicts. So that sort of kept me and us sort of out of the realm of that kind of discussion. But certainly October 7th changed things for all of us, and certainly for me. My role now became uh, much more critical in terms of what is the Jewish community experiencing? What do they need? Safety was a concern. They needed more resources in the Jewish community because safety now became a concern. There was a firebombing, attempted firebombing of a synagogue. All of these sorts of things became elevated, and certainly the Jewish community was devastated, and a local young man was slaughtered on October 7th. And that added another element of grief and he was well known in the Jewish community. So all of those things were happening. And everyone turned to me, the Jew in the crew. What does the community need? How can we support them? And I was, again, grateful to be a liaison and to support the community in that way. So in January of 2024, I was asked to speak on a panel about anti-Semitism, the rise of anti-Semitism. And I was the minister for post-secondary education, and we've certainly seen the rise of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred on campuses. And so it made sense for me to participate in this panel. It was a panel with uh, various elected, I'll say men, Jewish men from across the country. They needed someone from the West because they were all from the East, and they needed a woman, and they certainly needed a Democrat. So I fit the bill on all of those things, and the Minister of Post-Secondary Education. And in these panels, they often go from I'll say from the east to the west. So I was the last person to speak, and my time was running short. And I literally had just a couple of minutes to make my few points. And as I talked about the rise in anti-Semitism, I pointed out that this next generation, the 18 to 34-year-olds, the data is showing us that they don't understand the history of Jews, the history of persecution. They don't understand the Holocaust. And they don't understand that after the Holocaust, Israel was given to Jews. It was a crappy piece of land with nothing on it. Yes, there were 350,000 people who lived there, but it did not have the infrastructure or a thriving economy. So those are my qualifiers, that I was referring to the actual land itself, not to any person, not to the people who live there. But of course, there was one person who was on that webinar who decided to clip my words and pushed it out through social media. And that was all it took. And it became a firestorm, as you described in your opening comments, Yasmine.
Yeah, it was absolutely a firestorm that we were all very aware of. And this was happening after October 7th when the anti-Semitism in Canada had gone up by something astronomical, like
Mhm.
670%. So it was quite shocking to a lot of us that this was all going on now. As you mentioned, the schism in the New Democratic Party, I think that schism happened probably all across Canada, where people started to feel, the overwhelming propaganda was very victim blaming towards Israel at that point. And for anybody to speak up in support of the victims, the hostages, Israeli people, Jewish people across the world, was actually not a safe thing to do in our country. Um, so what I'd like to understand from you is when you look at how Canadians now, after the dust has settled a little bit, when Canadians are overwhelmingly in support of Jewish people and in support of Israel. So what I want to know is when you have these Muslim clergy coming and attacking you and demanding your resignation. Actually, before I ask that question, I'm going to ask you another question because you have a really good quote in your book where you say, did it matter that the issue was Israel and Palestine and that the clergy making the threat were Muslim? What would the premier's response have been, I wonder, had the issue been, say, reproductive freedom or LGBTQ rights and the clergy were Catholic bishops?
Yeah.
Why did the premier's office react so differently when it was this group of religious clergy that were demanding your resignation? Can you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on that?
So we haven't, it's not that we don't, we haven't historically looked at religious perspective in our policy development as New Democrats. So we know, for example, that the Catholic Church as an institution does not support women's rights to choose necessarily. They're pretty clear. But we still, as a political party, have said women have a right to choose, and here's how we act on that. And we don't allow the influence of a religious group to influence those policy decisions. We can recognize that they are there, but we don't accommodate because they make these demands. And yet here we were, we had six
Mhm.
Muslim clergy making a demand. And to go in a step further, there are two clergy that I know of, two Muslim clerics, who have called for the death to Jews from the pulpit. From the
Wow.
pulpit. One in Victoria, who does it incessantly, one in Port Coquitlam,
Mhm.
not far from where I live. And it is absolutely outrageous. And nobody calls them to task that from the pulpit,
Mhm.
they are quoting I'm not quite sure of the scripture, but they are quoting and calling for people to rise up against the Jews here in Canada, in British Columbia, where I live. And that's completely outrageous. And those were the same clerics who demanded my resignation.
Mhm.
It's not acceptable.
It's absolutely not acceptable. Now, you talk a lot about the quiet, quote unquote allies, but and then there were, of course, you mentioned too that there was a lot of people that were supporting you who could see the nonsense in all of this. Did you have an opportunity to speak with the premier at all? Did you have an opportunity to speak your truth, your voice, your perspective? Did you have an opportunity to bring up what you just said now, which is that these are people who repeatedly, I've seen so many YouTube videos of that particular imam in Victoria calling for the death of Jews, calling for the death, the destruction of Israel, et cetera, et cetera, very comfortably, like you said, over and over and over again, incessantly. And for us to cater to the demands of people that are calling for the death of Jews, did they not see that there was an issue here?
What's disappointing to me, Yasmin, is that this wasn't a principle-based decision. This was a what I'll call a populist, fear-based decision that, in the moment, I think required courage. And the premier did not have the courage to say, this is wrong. Yes, there are mobs. It's a mob mentality that is happening. And some of the mob is the people inside. It's still wrong. And we're
Mhm.
not going to cater to that. And that requires a principled decision, not a populist or fearful decision. And I will tell you that when I saw the firestorm erupting, I did text the premier and said, I am really sorry. I didn't expect to create this firestorm. I'm crafting an apology. Like, I want to settle
Mhm.
it down. I apologize if my words hurt people. Did not want that to happen. And his response to me, and I still have the text, was, happens to the best of us. Don't worry about it.
Mhm.
And then 72 hours later, he was telling me that I had to resign. And
Yeah.
I refused, and he fired me. Like, let's be really clear, he fired me. He required that he no longer wanted me to serve in cabinet because of the firestorm, not because of what I said.
Mhm.
Um, so he fired me because of the firestorm. My understanding from my colleagues about why I was fired was because I spoke about the conflict. So that's a second story, which I wasn't speaking about the conflict. We'd agreed as a caucus that we wouldn't speak about the conflict. It was creating a firestorm out in the public, and we wanted to be dealing with healthcare and education and all those sorts of things. Um, and then the third story was I had deep work to do. So there were three stories about, and different people got different stories about why I was fired. I was fired because I had deep work to do, and I couldn't possibly be a minister and do that deep work. I was fired to my colleagues, as far as I've heard. The story that was told to them was I was fired because I spoke about the conflict, and we all agreed we wouldn't speak about the conflict. And I think the reality is I was fired because there was a firestorm and the premier didn't like the firestorm. And so if I was fired, it would suppress the activity that he was seeing.
Yeah. I mean, that's always the best way to respond to bullies. Just give them what they want and then they'll go away and they'll be quiet after that, right?
Because that's
This
worked
is
really well, Yasmin. It's worked really
It's a
well.
perfect, great strategy. Yeah, we can see how well it's working for us here in Canada. That's essentially, you've read my book. That's essentially what I'm screaming over and over and over again is we can't be angry at, you know, for a rattlesnake we can't be angry at a snake for biting, right? We're not going to be angry at a scorpion for stinging. This is what they do. It is our responsibility
Yeah,
to stand firm and to have a very clear stand solid in our values, right? And if we
exactly.
completely lose our values as soon as there is noise. And this is why terrorism is so successful. I mean, it doesn't even have to reach terrorism.
Exactly.
It just has to reach, a little bit too many tweets and
Har-
noise and, they
It's
just
harassment. As soon
immediately
as there's any
kowtow.
harassment, yeah.
Correct, correct,
Yeah, yeah.
correct.
They just, as soon as
Capitulate.
the volume is pumped up, yeah, it's just like, okay, we just want it to go away.
Yeah.
And that gives them more permission. They become more and more emboldened. Even
Yes.
after I was fired, my constituency office was vandalized. So it's like, what more do they want? I was fired. You asked me to be for me, the premier to fire me. I was fired. And so you continue to hate me because I'm a
Hmm.
Jew. I mean, let's be
Hmm.
really clear. Yeah.
Yeah,
They hated me because I'm a Jew. They wanted
of
me
course.
gone because I'm a Jew, because I was a Jew with power. And
Hmm.
the premier said, okay,
Yeah.
okay, we'll do that. Because I'm either, and the way I look at it is either you're too lazy, you're too indifferent, or you're too afraid,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
sometimes all three. And that is very disappointing. And we're seeing that consistently. We certainly, in your case, Yasmine, it's just like when we started, I apologize to you for our government not protecting you as it should have. Our system was supposed to
Hmm.
protect you as a child, and it didn't.
Hmm.
And I am mortified and horrified that we didn't do what we were supposed to do. And
Hmm.
I feel somewhat responsible for that because it's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. No, and you shouldn't feel responsible for that. Selena, you're a victim of the exact same beast that we're talking about here. You're a victim of the exact same
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
And in the same way they failed me, they failed you as well. I really feel like we're at such a precipice here in Canada. It's really important for us to change course pretty quickly because we have already capitulated so much and we've made it clear that we would be willing to capitulate as much as possible. And the other side is just, like you said, emboldened. This every single win for them is a morale boost. When I was reading that you apologized to the National Council of Canadian Muslims, I was like, that's like blood in the water for them.
for
They
sure.
they love that. So
Yeah.
it gives them this sense of superiority. Now suddenly they can just feel holier than thou, and they can feel that they're being
Well,
um,
even better, Yasmin, when the premier said, that I had deep work to do, the deep work that was on his list was always to make some phone calls to Muslim leaders
right.
in the community.
Hmm.
And I kept thinking, so Muslims from Pakistan, Muslims from
Hmm.
Indonesia, like there's very different, I was talking about a very particular piece of land. And I did speak to a couple of Muslims who say they're Palestinian, but have never lived anywhere near there, which is a different kind of conversation. But
Hmm.
um, the part of the list was I was to contact the NCCM, the National Council for Canadian Muslims. I was scheduled for like a 2:30, call them on this Thursday at 2:30 to talk with them. And so I did. And I got voicemail. I left a
Hmm.
voicemail, said, I might be a little bit, I might be busy on a call. I'll call back in another 30 minutes. Called back 30 minutes later, left another voicemail, and I never heard back from them. And that to me
Hmm.
was the most telling thing that they were never interested in trying to educate me, help me understand, trying to develop relationship. They were just not interested because this was not about a relationship. This was not about healing wounds. This was about scoring points against the Jew.
You got it.
And to me, that speaks to why they exist and what they're about.
100%. 100%. And I also thought it was interesting in your book how you recounted how a lot of the other groups that you called to speak to on this topic about how the deep work that you needed to do, a lot of them either didn't know what you were talking about or could not point to any deep hurt that you had caused, So
Yeah,
the whole thing was just a complete farce. And I'm so sorry that you got pulled
yeah.
into it.
Well, I think it was inevitable, Yasmin. So I think. if it wasn't those 5 words, it would have been something else. Because I
Yeah.
was not remaining silent. I was not sitting in the background, wringing my hands, saying, "This is terrible, this is terrible." I was being quite vocal. We were seeing
Hmm.
anti-Semitism rise on campuses across this country. That was
Hmm.
outrageous. Jewish students
Hmm.
couldn't get to their classes. They were hiding in the bathroom, in the hallways, because there were these wannabe rebellious young people
And
shouting,
professors,
and
professors as well.
professors and professors
Hmm.
shouting, "Death to Jews, Intifada now, from
Hmm.
the river to
Hmm.
the sea."
Hmm.
And Jewish students were afraid, and our institutions are supposed to be places where everybody gets to talk about ideas. And a small group of students were being cast aside, afraid to say they were Jewish, taking off their Jewish stars, um, just fearful of going to class. And
Hmm.
our university presidents had a responsibility. And I was a minister for post-secondary education. So I felt an obligation to hold them accountable to making sure that every student on campus was safe, that they were to enforce their policies. And what we saw was them not enforcing their policies and capitulating to the mob, another set of leaders that have failed our young people.
Yeah.
They've completely failed because I think they're afraid. They're afraid of them being attacked by the mob. Well, look what happened to
We're,
Selena. We don't want that to happen to us. And
yep.
so the mob requires people to be silent or they will be attacked. But there's more of us than them, people. There's more of us
Yeah.
than them. So what are we going to do to push back? Because it's not okay. It's just not
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah. Yep, which is a perfect segue into my next question about the quiet allies that you spoke about in your book. So you said the deepest hurt came not from the overt hate, but came from these quiet allies who refused to speak up. It was cowardice, essentially. There was so much cowardice within the political parties that these Muslims were able to sway them into performing the whatever demands that they wanted. So back to the question that I was wanting to ask you before, the polls show over and over again that the majority of Canadians are adamantly against anti-Semitism and they support Israel and they seem to have a good grasp on the current conflict. Why are these politicians being so short-sighted across the board? So this isn't just NDP now. Like this is just Canada in general, and our, Toronto Police Department, and our, our ministries of education, like the Peel School Board, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much, whether it's in media, education, government. Why are Canadians being so short-sighted on this topic?
I think there's a couple of things going on, Yasmine. I think, first of all, we are living in an era where there's the oppressed and the oppressor. There's a dichotomy. And if you're either one or the other. I argue that we can be both at the same time, actually.
Yeah.
We are all multi-identitied and can wear different hats at different times. Um, and in this case, if you're brown-skinned, you're oppressed. And Jews are seen as white-skinned. And so it goes into the whole dialogue of white privilege, even though most Jews in the world are brown-skinned. That's
Yeah.
not what people see here, certainly mostly in Canada. There's also this notion that um, of votes. I can't be more
Mm-hmm.
blunt than that. There's
Mm-hmm.
about 400,000 Jewish people in
Mm-hmm.
Canada, uh, triple that, triple the number from Muslims.
Yeah.
So you're looking at votes. The other thing that I think is also needing to be considered is that the mob is a scary thing, and nobody
Definitely.
wants to get attacked by a mob. So it's easier to stay quiet. It's easier to just cater to those votes that you think you're going to get. I do want to point out that I was fired. One of the Muslims and the large Muslim population is in Surrey, British Columbia, which is one of the southern suburbs. And I'm pretty confident, don't know for 100%, but I'm pretty confident my colleagues who wanted me fired, a lot of them came from Surrey because they were worried about votes. We were heading into an election the following October. I got fired, but most of those colleagues did not win re-election. And the
Yay.
less,
Karma.
yeah, in some ways, but the lesson here is that, and you'd start off the question with, most Canadians support the existence of Israel. Most Canadians
Hmm.
arguably then are Zionist because that's what Zionism means, that Israel has a right to exist. Um, is that we're not single issue voters as
Yeah.
Canadians, right? What are
Hmm.
the big issues for most Canadians? It's affordability, affordability, affordability. It's housing,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
healthcare. Those are the things that drive voting. And this is an issue where I think the left is failing miserably, but they're pretty good on some of the other issues, which is where I went. And so at the end of the day, when it comes down to voters and voting, this isn't a top issue for most voters.
Hmm.
And so at the end of the day, the Jewish community continues to be harassed, continues to be excluded from the, the public realm, um, gets beat up. We just had in Montreal, a Jewish man was beat up. We had the TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, cancel a film about October 7th and the heroism of a grandfather saving his family from Hamas. And Jews just get silenced. Jewish voices get silenced, and Israel will continue to be the pariah that others make it out to be. And as a member of the Jewish community, I refuse to be silenced, and I'm encouraging others as well as allies to don't let that happen. Because
Hmm.
while Jews might be the target right now, our history tells us doesn't end there.
Hmm.
It might start with the Saturday people, but then they come for the Sunday people. It might start with the Jews, but then it goes to other groups. So I think this is a wake-up call for all of us to stand firm and to say these aren't our values, and you don't get to bully us into compromising on our principles and our values.
100%. So well said, Selena. Every single syllable of that. And I love that cautionary tale because that is a really important point that you made there. That they can capitulate to these mobs because they don't want to deal with the noise, because they want to, appease the bullies so that they can get some peace and quiet. The way you said it about the premier is you said that he chose ethics. Sorry, he chose
Expediency.
political expediency over ethics. He certainly didn't choose ethics. Um, and when they do that at the end of the day, yeah, sure, the Jewish people in Canada are a very small minority and Muslims are a much larger minority. But the largest group of all of Canadians who are also voting are in support of Israel and are very much against anti-Semitism. So these very short-sighted decisions that they made ended up biting them in the end. So,
In the end, although
you
what
know,
I worry about, Yasmin, because we're not through it. It's still going on. And there's so much misinformation and disinformation that is out there that's circulating, whether it's TikTok or Twitter or Facebook. It is, our social media, um, the use of social media to spread lies is very real. So I
yeah.
worry I mean, I see it and it's just like, none of this is true. So we're all in a place now, we don't know who to believe. We see our traditional media because they have to work so quickly, um,
Mhm.
just
They
repeating
can.
whatever they see, whatever they read. And so it's become this world of misinformation and disinformation. I worry that there are more nefarious actors that are at play here. There's some speculation that Russia and Iran are fueling this. And really,
Hmm.
this is about social disintegration. This is about creating social unrest in the West. This is about creating opportunities for nefarious actors. And that's what I worry about. And our leaders are falling for it. They're falling into this trap. And that to me is much more concerning than, me being fired, right? Like me being fired was just an example
One
of how
piece
it's
of
play,
this
yeah, of how it's
huge.
playing out. But it's
Yeah,
much bigger. And
absolutely.
you're sounding the alarm. I'm sounding the alarm, and it's like no one is listening, and
Hmm, hmm.
that worries me. That's what worries me.
Yeah. Well, we go back to at first they came for the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist, so I didn't speak up. People don't
Exactly.
speak up until it affects them
Yeah.
personally, and then they
Yeah.
start to pay attention. But yeah, absolutely what you said, that this is so much bigger, and we've been talking about this on this podcast. You mentioned Russia, you mentioned Iran, absolutely, and also Qatar. Billions and
Yeah.
billions of
Yeah.
dollars are being funneled into American universities, post-secondary universities, or post-secondary institutions across the West, funneling their money in there to get their propaganda in there. That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
purpose of it. That's the point of it. And we saw after October 7th how incredibly successful that strategy was, how quickly
Yeah.
people turned, um, before Israel even had a chance to defend itself against this war, this attack from Hamas. They were immediately already victim blaming and supporting
Mhm.
the group that had killed and kidnapped so many people in Israel.
I've been saying since October 7th, and we saw this uprising within a day, that Hamas wasn't just building tunnels in Gaza, they were building tunnels in the West as well because they were
Yes.
ready. People were ready to come out from wherever they were hiding in this really organized fashion.
Yeah.
And people are falling for it.
Yeah, it was immediate and across the world, so quick.
Yeah.
So, yeah, pretty crazy. I was interviewing somebody from Australia here who was telling me he woke up on October 8th to Palestinian flags all over his
Yes.
neighborhood. And that's
Yeah,
what made him go,
exactly.
what is happening? He wasn't even engaged in understanding anything to do with this. It's a
Yeah.
Middle East conflict. But he woke up that morning and was like, something is severely wrong, after he knew what had happened the day before. And the day after, there's Palestinian flags all over the place. Something is rotten
Right.
here. So it was obviously the most horrible day, the worst day for Jewish people since the Holocaust. Um, and also it has illuminated for so many what we call now October 8th Jews, for so many Jewish people and Jewish allies across the world, for us to suddenly pay attention and say, what's happening here? This is very wrong, and to speak up in support. Sarah and I both got our Star of David's
Thank you.
here,
Thank you.
and we wear them in support. And so many people are now trying to do as much as they can. I know you got a lot of messages of support. Unfortunately, it was not enough at the end of the day, but it's heartening to know that at least there are sane, rational voices out there, or even if they're not voices, there are at least rational minds out there that haven't found the courage to have a voice quite
Yeah.
yet. But at the end of your book, you have a real strong call to action, very detailed, giving us all, because this is really what it comes down to at the end of the day. We can sit here, we can talk about it, we can lament, we can, um, be upset about it all, but what we want to do is we want to change this. We want specific, actions. What are practical things that we can do to support the Jewish community? So I won't give it all away because I want people to pick up your book again. It's called Truth Be Told. But you give advice to Jewish people, you give advice to non-Jewish people, you give advice to all sorts of different groups. And the thing that you said there, I think the most salient advice for me, and the advice that I thought was, how could this not be, how could this be advice that you are giving? How could this not already be so obvious to everyone? is that you said we should treat anti-Semitism like other forms of racism, which seems like a no-brainer. And we are running out of time, but I do want you to, if you could somehow concisely, I know that's a very big ask, but there you trace anti-Semitism historically in your book, and the anti-Semitism in Canada from, to the present day, the political culture right now. What are some parallels that you see between older systemic, you know, exclusion of Jewish people and anti-Semitism? How is that manifesting in our institutions today? And why aren't we treating it the same way we would treat any other racism?
So that's a lot to unpack
It is.
in a short period of time. But I think if you, I mean, anti-Semitism is a very old hatred. It has a and it happens when there are challenges in the world or in the country that get used for political purposes. So in Spain, there was a large Jewish population there once upon a time, and Jews were forced to convert or leave because of the desire to overtake and to have everyone adhere to the church. In Germany, it was about race. To have a pure Aryan race, and Jews were vilified and subsequently killed. 6 million Jews were slaughtered. Um, and so it was about pure racial purity. And now here we are, 100 years later, and it's presenting differently in a more political realm or in a social justice realm, that Jews aren't socially just, because look at Israel, which is the homeland of Jews, because of the conflict there, and Jews are the bad guys in this conflict. And so we are somehow treated as other, because I believe, as a Jewish person, Israel has been our homeland for thousands of years. We were kicked out of it thousands of years ago. We've always prayed to Jerusalem. We've always remembered Jerusalem at our wedding ceremonies. There's a whole history of our indigeneity to those lands. And yet we are somehow told that we are the oppressor, the colonizer, and engaged in all these terrible, unjust practices, when in fact none of that is true. And so the lies are believed. And we've seen this, whether it was in Spain in the 1400s or in Germany in the 1930s, it's the same process that gets used. And so it changes, it morphs over time, depending on what the zeitgeist is of the era. And it's not treated the same as other racisms because it gets excused. I'm
Mhm.
not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist. It's like,
Right.
what is that? So, well, I spoke to one of our local elected people. I won't say who it is. Um, and I was meeting with him and I said, do you believe in the two-state solution? Do you think Israel has a right to exist? And he said, well, yeah. I said, then you're a Zionist. And he looked at
Mhm.
me dumbfounded, because it was as if I swore at him.
Yeah,
It's like, right? It's like, yeah, Zionism is the desire for a homeland, is this is
that's it.
national homeland. Do I believe that Palestinians should have a homeland? Yes. Okay. Well, then Palestinians who want a homeland, a two-state, then they have to be Zionist too. Like,
Mhm.
you can't, if you want to eliminate Israel, then I would argue that you're not a Zionist, and that you hate Jews. You don't believe Jews have a right to a homeland. But anyone who believes
Mhm.
that Jews have a right to a homeland would therefore be a Zionist. And so this is where we twist ourselves into a pretzel to not be racist and be anti-Zionist. The
Mhm.
mental gymnastics to do both and is beyond belief. And
Mhm.
uh, and so there isn't acknowledgement. The other thing, especially I would say among progressives, if I were to say something that was hurtful to a minority group or a racialized group, and they said, ouch, that hurt. The expectation on me as a progressive person, as believes in anti-racism, is like, I am really sorry. Can you please help me understand how that was hurtful? I won't do that again. I won't use that language again. I won't use that word again. But somehow, when a Jew says, this is hurtful, well,
Mm,
how is that? We have to justify it. We are told we're wrong. We're told we're sent like, we're all powerful and we're powerless at the same time. Like it just it's there's a craziness about how anti-Semitism gets hived off as a separate ism, but everything else is treated as sort of, oh well, we have to fix that. And
mhm,
and and that's about, I think, old tropes. Jews are powerful, I think, is one of them, right? So therefore Jews are privileged. Jews are white, Jews are so we're identified as oppressor. Um, and people have all kinds of make all kinds of assumptions about who we are. You can't trust us because we are shapeshifters is the other one. We seem to just blend in all the time. So these are the kinds of things that are described about us. And I talk about, there's only 15.8 million Jews. There's
mhm,
fewer Jews today than there were in a pre-World War II world. So we have not yet even made up for the murdered Jews in the Holocaust. And most people will go through life never knowing a Jewish person. So if you
mm,
never meet a Jewish person, it's really easy to make up all kinds of stories about them. And so part of my advice to Jews and non-Jews alike is we have to go be out in the world as Jews. Talk to us, ask us questions, be curious about who we are, what our values are. And if you're not Jewish, seek out the Jewish community. Ask how I can help. What can I do? Folks might be a little suspicious at first because the world hasn't been kind to us these last 22 months for sure, but certainly say, I want to know more about you. Tell me about growing up as a Jewish person. Tell me about the values that you're raised with. Help me to understand how anti-Semitism impacts you. Um, and for Jewish people, I think we have to be out in the world. And right now, it feels frightening. The world is a scary place for Jews. Um, and our instinct is to hide, but we can't. We can't hide. We need to invite people into our homes for Shabbat. I actually have challah right now rising,
mhm,
so that I can have a Shabbat dinner tonight, Friday night. We need to invite people into our Seder tables, to our Hanukkah celebrations, to our weddings and bar mitzvahs and our celebratory times. We need to be real to people so that they know who we are, that we are not to be feared, and that we're not evil the way that the misinformation and disinformation, the way the internet castigates us as other.
mhm. That is so beautiful. And I cannot tell you how many people like myself who were raised with just the most vicious anti-Semitism had our cognitive dissonance really challenged when we met a Jewish person who was kind and loving and supportive. And it just made us feel like, wait a minute, how is this possible? You know, I was told that you were evil and that you wanted us all dead. So I completely agree with what you're saying, but I will add the caveat though that I've seen a lot of Jewish people, especially after October 7th, kind of doing this thing where they're trying to convince people of their humanity, trying to convince people of their right to exist. And it breaks my heart because I know that you cannot change the mind of a person whose brain is just possessed with hate. And for you to stand there and try to convince these people that you are a fellow human and that you deserve humanity, you're not going to get anywhere and you're only going to exhaust yourself. So, absolutely everything that you said, but be careful who you're
Yes.
inviting into your home and to these, Shabbat dinner and bar mitzvahs, etc. Be very careful that these are people who are open to understanding, open to learning, that they have love in their hearts, but maybe just a lot of propaganda in their minds. They got a little bit too much TikTok, right? But don't think that you're going to be able to just invite somebody who's like a full-on Islamist or Marxist or
Yeah,
something, or
exactly.
some KKK person and be like, let's have a discussion. Do not do
Yeah.
that. Do not waste your time. Do not waste your energy. Spend your energy loving yourself, loving your family, loving the people around you, loving those who are
Who are
reciprocating
open.
that love.
And again,
Yeah.
it's about people who are open. This past Hanukkah, I invited my entire street where I've lived for over 30 years. I invited them to a Hanukkah celebration. I made potato latkes
Wow.
for 50 people. They had a lot of them had never been in my home, and they loved it. My neighbors, and then they asked me questions about the mezuzah on my door. They knew me. I was their representative in government, but they didn't know the Jewish me. And
Mhm.
they'll ask me questions, and they acknowledge my Jewish star, and they talk about the fact that, how lovely it was to celebrate my holiday with me. And it's those kinds of things where there are people in our lives who don't know how to be allies. They want to be,
Yeah.
they like us, but they don't know that part of us. So how do we help them feel confident to say, you know what, you're talking about my friend, and that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they can help be our voice. And so that's part of what we need. We need to engage the Jewish community and others like you, Yasmine. We need to be engaging people to find their voice, to say, you know what, not on my watch. This isn't
Yeah.
okay. This is not
Yeah.
who we are as Canadians. We will
Mhm.
we will stand up for our neighbors and our friends, and say this kind of mob mentality is not acceptable to us.
Mhm. Beautiful. So you're such a beautiful soul, Selena.
Well,
You
thanks,
know what?
Yasmine.
Sometimes the worst things that can happen in your life, you don't know they could possibly be a catalyst for the best things to come. I think that this firestorm bringing you out into the spotlight across Canada like this, all of this noise that's happened, it's only going to allow more and more Canadians to see what a wonderful human being you are and what an amazing woman and politician you are. And I think that this could possibly be, just the beginning of much, much brighter, bigger things for you.
Thanks, Yasmin. And thank you for highlighting my book. It's available on Amazon and on Audible. And I want to thank you for writing your book. It taught me so much. And I think, being open to hearing people's stories about their experiences is really critical. And so, again, I want to thank you for helping to illuminate my understanding of what it was like for you to be raised in an Islamist environment right here in Canada.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Selena. I really appreciate that. All right, so now I'm going to take us to the Q&A period. We're going to start with Zane. Zane, please go ahead and ask Selena your question.
Thank you. Hi, Selena.
Hi,
My
Zane.
question is, hi, uh, how do we, those of us on the left, I was in Vancouver as part of the larger activist space there. How do those of us on the left who want to hold on to our left-leaning beliefs, how do we stay committed to them in an organized manner while not wanting to be members of political parties that have basically given way to anti-Semitism? How do we do that in a practical and organized manner?
Yeah, this is a tough one, Zane. And I supported some people, particularly women, who ran in my party in the New BC New Democrats. I mean, I left the party. I sat as an independent. And we need good people in our governments, and we need people who aren't anti-Semitic to be in all of our parties. So for me, it's encouraging people, if you're a progressive, join the party and hold those who are anti-Semitic within the party accountable. You can do change from outside and you can do change from inside. And so we do need people inside these political parties doing the hard work. So I encourage you to sign up and fight from the inside.
Thank you.
Roll up your sleeves, Zane. Thank you so much, Selena. All right, next we have Georgette.
Off mute. Hi, Selena. I don't live in
Hi.
DC. I live in Boston. Um, I work at a private independent school. I'm I don't have a lot of I don't really have any Jewish friends. I lived in the Middle East for, I don't know, 9 years. My cousins, one's married to a Jordanian and Egyptian. Um, and I just find it's interesting because a lot of my Jewish friends and colleagues, um, they seem to support Palestine. And it's not like it's I'm not of the opinion that there's one truth. There's many truths,
Mhm, mhm.
uh, Palestinians should get their homeland, but I think Israel should too. When I lived in the Middle East, I was listening to what Yasmine was saying, and it's totally true. I mean, I saw little kids that hated Israel, and I was like, so do you know any Jews? Do you know any Israelis? And they were like, no. And I was like, so what do you hate about them? And they're like, everything, they're evil. And I'm like, what makes them evil? And it was so bizarre. And I thought, what the hell? And then I come to the US and well, this is where I live. And a lot of my friends, I mean, I have a really good friend. She's African American. And when I said to her, like particularly at Cambridge, some of the Jewish students and some of my friends at Columbia, I mean, people went into classrooms, blocked them from getting in the library. And her response, and her brother-in-law's Jew, was, I said, these kids should be protected. And she was like, Jews have a lot of resources and protections for them. And I'm like, so if they look like us and it was just bizarre. And I was like, so where does this come from? I mean,
So,
like,
yeah,
why do you think that even if they are privileged, what the hell?
right,
Even if they
right.
are, even if someone was a shit, I don't care. People deserve to have respect for whomever they were. I mean, at Princeton
Exactly.
University, they've hired a former Iranian, I forget his name, uh, a Ghazavian, I forget, but my Persian friends tell me that he persecuted Persians, and now he's at Princeton University as an intellectual. So
So,
I guess I don't understand the passivity.
so
Um,
perhaps I can just elucidate a little bit about what you were saying, Georgette, and thank you so much for raising this. The fact that there's a conflict and a war happening thousands of miles away that is complex and old, um, and um, and intractable in many, many ways. But Jews here get targeted. We don't make any military decisions. We don't make any policy decisions. We don't elect in those, we didn't elect Netanyahu, but somehow we are held to blame for military and policy decisions made by a foreign government. In no other place do we do that. We don't do that with Chinese Canadians or Chinese Americans, right? We don't say you're responsible for the policy decisions of China or Italian decisions if you're Italian American. So there is something amiss in the ease with which people move into, oh, you're Jewish, Israel's a horrible place. Israel's policies are terrible. We don't do that with anything else. And that's another piece that I think is acting out here. Why we don't, I'm not holding any Palestinian who lives here responsible for the decisions of Hamas. Hamas is a murderous terrorist group. I would not go up to a Palestinian and say, this is your fault. These are your people. I would never dream of doing that. But somehow it's okay to do that, to hold Jews responsible for a foreign government. And that's another unique piece about anti-Semitism that we're seeing.
but what about Jews? I mean, a lot of my friends, like I lived in a co-housing community in DC, and it was a lot of Reform Jews. I don't know what that means. But they were like Jews for Palestine, and I'm like, okay, you can be for Palestine, but
There's a
um,
small group. There's a small group. I mean, we're not
yeah,
we're not monolithic like any other group,
right. I know that, but
right?
I felt like, I mean, then I'd have my friends that were against Israel, literally for the destruction of all Jews, and I'm like, hello, how the hell can you be for the destruction of every person that's a Jew?
Exactly. Right.
Doesn't
But
that
that's
sound
right.
ridiculous? These are
Right.
college educated people. So I've
Yeah,
come to
that's what we're saying.
understand, well, I've come to understand that information isn't knowledge, and a lot of people at
Yes,
university have information, but they don't have knowledge. And
exactly. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Living in the Middle East was a really telling experience for
Yes,
me because, like I
right.
said, I was blown away at I think what Yasmine was saying, at such a young age, people were,
Yes.
they were just given this seed of hate. And
Indoctrinated. Yeah.
like it's insane. And on the maps, there was no Israel. We weren't allowed to talk about it, even in Qatar. And I was like, I mean, obviously, I didn't stay there long because I got in too much trouble. But it was just for me very bizarre. And then coming back here, it's such a trendy thing to be,
Yes.
or I mean, it's no offense to anyone if they have dreadlocks, but it's a very white dreadlocky kind of guy. That's, hey, with his drums, and all that. Those are the people that come up to me and say, "Hey, sis,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, "What do you?"
I
So I
think
just find
what
it
what
really
you're tapping
interesting.
into, Georgette, is this notion of belonging, and I do think that there is something missing in our social fabric, and I don't know that this is necessarily the case, but I know that people want to belong. We know that, particularly young people. But I also have this theory, it's just my theory, that COVID really messed with us for a number of years, particularly young people. And here's a group that comes along and says, "Hey, you can belong with us. You can connect with us. We got lots of things happening. All you have to do is hate Jews."
Selena, you're being too kind. I just don't, I'm not going to dismiss people and give them an out. There's a humanity
Okay.
that we should all have. Even if I don't like someone, if someone's going to hurt them, I'm going to,
Yeah.
interfere.
Well,
Something,
thank you, Georgette.
something's got
Thank
to
you.
feed.
You're right. You're right.
Thank you, Georgette. You had some really great comments, Georgette. Thank you so much for everything you had to say. We really appreciate it. I have a question here from somebody who did not want to ask their question directly, so I'm going to ask it for them. It says, I was wondering if Selina had any insight on the removal of the October 7th documentary at the Toronto Film Festival due to Hamas not approving the footage. Due to Hamas? I can't even believe I just read that sentence aloud. Like, this is the world we live in right now. The terrorists don't like it, so please remove it. And they capitulated. A terror group gets to dictate freedom of information? That's the question. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that, Selena?
So this was yesterday's firestorm. The Toronto International Film Festival was going to show this film. It was invited. They were invited to show this film that is about the heroic actions of a grandfather to get his son and grandchildren back from the terrorists on October 7th. And it sounds like there was pressure put on the organizers, on TIFF, to cancel this showing, and they did. And the rationale, which we still don't necessarily understand, the rationale that was provided at the time was that, well, you don't really have the legal permission to use the footage. And it's like, this is the footage that the terrorists put on the internet for everyone to see. And the lawyers are worried that you don't have permission to use it. What? In what world is this important? Then there was some speculation that perhaps that was actually the people working at TIFF who were, if it was shown, we're going to walk off the job. So that became a little bit of a scuttlebutt. I would say the Jewish community and others lost their minds, took to the internet, just became a mob in and of ourselves with protests organized saying, listen, this is ridiculous. And they reinstated as of late yesterday. It is back in the program. Apparently, there's going to be a counter protest by the mob that wants it canceled. And again, this is what we're starting to see now. When you don't make decisions based on values and principles and you get swung all over the place. It's an example of weak leadership. We had weak leadership at TIFF because I believe they know that this was perfectly legitimate to show this film and to engage. Now, the other thing I want to say, this is disappointing with TIFF, when they sent out their very first, I guess, crisis response communique saying that we understand that the events of October 7th are controversial. And I thought, the events of October 7th are controversial? Like the fact that 1,200 people were slaughtered, raped, mutilated, babies kidnapped, that it's controversial. There are events this is a horrifying terrorist act on a people's. And I think it's important to also understand to those who are, progressive and want to see, peace. I mean, we all want to see peace, and it's not just progressives, but the people that were slaughtered were the very people that were pushing for peace.
Yeah.
They were the very people that were bringing Gazans to hospitals in Israel for care. The very people who were trying to build bridges wherever they could. These were the ones who were slaughtered. And I'm trying to understand how it is that we are not saying how the evil nature of their actions is on Hamas. It is on those people who chose to do those acts. And instead we're getting this forgiveness of the people who were terrorists, who committed murder, who
More
the
than
Bibas
forgiveness, celebration of them.
Yes.
The day
Yeah.
after, we saw all over social media, people, what was it? Black Lives Matter changed their profile picture to a paraglider.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know,
By
it
any
was
means
absolutely
necessary.
disgusting.
It's the by any means necessary. It's like, really? Do you really believe that? By any means necessary? Like, who are you that you think that this is acceptable behavior? And that's what's disappointing. We're seeing it in our unions. I mean, CUPE National here in Canada, the
gosh,
largest
CUPE.
union, they've been outrageous by any means necessary. You're the people that say, let's sit down and negotiate contracts. You should be saying, let's get people to sit down and negotiate peace. But you're the ones out there celebrating, the leader of that union celebrating October 7th as any means necessary. I think that's horrifying. And anyone who's a QP member, you need to vote these people out. They are joining with the terrorists in celebrating the massacre of innocent people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Thank you so much, Selina. Christopher, you are next.
Hello, Selina.
Hi,
What
Christopher.
Hi. What practical actions do you think we can take to address Islamism in Western society now that Islamists have entered our society and so many people are sympathetic to them?
That's a great question. And I'm certainly no expert on it, but I think we need to recognize what our values are as Canadians, and as I would say, Western societal values around pluralism and around um, uh, uh, um, recognizing, women's rights and recognizing LGBTQ rights, that we need to be consistent. We need to be consistent in our values. Because the reality is Islamists don't support LGBTQ. They do not. They do not support women's rights. They do not so while they might start with the Jews, it ain't going to end there. And so we need to be really clear about what our values are and say, no, that's not acceptable here. Those behaviors, those demands are not acceptable here. And we need to be consistent. And that's part of what we're not seeing, is we're not seeing a consistency. You don't get to dictate these sorts of things. And it's a sort of thing that if you've read Yasmine's book, the most heartbreaking part was when a teacher had gone to bat for Yasmine, helped her deal with child services. And the judge said to the man, her abuser, is that you're from a different culture, and just gave permission for him to carry on abusing her. That was the wrong thing to do. That yes, we are pluralists and we welcome people from different cultures, but there is a basis for behavior that is expected. And beating your child is not acceptable. I don't care what culture you're from. You do not get to do that. And that is sort of where we're missing the mark, and we need to get back to that. We need to get to that. I don't know that we were ever there, but it's a perfect example of what we're doing wrong that we need to be better at.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense. I think a lot of people probably don't really understand the problems associated with Islamism, and they're largely ignorant of what you're saying. Do you think we could try educating more people in society?
You're probably right. And the question is, so who should be doing that work? I mean, I want to appeal to, I'll say, moderate Muslims, because I know that there are moderate Muslims. Like, where are your voices in helping us, people who aren't Muslim, understand the difference between those who want the entire world under Sharia law, and those who don't, who recognize pluralism, recognize the value of different religions, different ways of being in the world, as long as you're not hurting other people, which I think is the basic understanding. And so we need moderate Muslim voices to be elevated, because I think that's really critical, I think, to the rest of us and to understanding what's happening right now.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And if I could interject here, Christopher, this is a good opportunity for me to plug an organization that I'm co-founder of and co-director of. It's called the Clarity Coalition, which I co-founded with a Muslim, like you just described, Selina. He's an American physician named Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is a Muslim. And he is very much for Western values and democracy, and very much in agreement with everything that we would have said today, very much against anti-Semitism, very much in support of Jewish people and Israel's right to exist and defend itself. And I also started a limited series, which is in collaboration with Sam Harris, called Islam in the West. And my next guest is Raheel Raza, who is a fellow Canadian who will be coming to speak on exactly that topic, Selina. She's coming to talk about the difference between Muslims, your average everyday Muslims who believe in Western values, and then the Muslims who would love to see all of the West eradicated, Israel, Australia, Europe, anything that is non-Muslim, basically. And so we're going to speak about those groups of people and all the nuance in between. And Christopher, to your point of people not knowing, I find that so hard to believe, and maybe it's because I'm immersed in this work. But take a look at any one of the 57 Muslim majority countries, right? Take a look at Iran, take a look at Afghanistan, take a look at Saudi Arabia. Keep looking. See if you can find any one of them where the rights of LGBT people are protected or the rights of women are protected. Like in Iraq, very recently, they brought the age of marriage down from 18 down to 9. This is what's happening in these countries. So it's really hard for me to believe that people are unaware. I don't think that I don't know, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe people really are that unaware, but I think it's more likely that we have been trained to never criticize any other cultures other than our own. We're only allowed to criticize Western culture. And so that allows our culture to progress because that's what criticism does. It allows people to progress, but they are coddled in every other culture. It doesn't matter what they're doing over there. They are protected, they are coddled. Even if, like the Pakistani rape gangs happening all across the UK, even if they are raping your daughters and taking them imprisoned and torturing them, we're still not going to speak up against them because that would be Islamophobic, right? So we've just been trained. People know, people must know, but we have been trained to shut our mouths because otherwise we would be bigots, Islamophobes, et cetera, which incidentally, the term Islamophobia was created by Islamists for exactly this purpose, for bottom-up blasphemy, for us to police each other and us to silence each other, because they can't do it top-down the same way they do in the Islamic regime of Iran or in Pakistan or in Afghanistan or any other of these 57 Muslim majority countries. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at the Clarity Coalition, and if you're interested in joining, Selina, I am most definitely going to speak to you about that after this. I think it's a group that you would be so celebrated amongst us. You are exactly the kind of person that is just a beacon of hope in this fight. And we're out there, but we are such a small number compared to when you look at the 2 billion Muslims most of them, and we know this through data, we were very clear on it, that the vast majority of them, if they do not already support Hamas directly, they will at least not say anything against Hamas, Al Qaeda, ISIS, Islamic regime of Iran, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, you get
Taliban.
killed. Well, you get
Yeah,
killed if you
that's
do.
right.
Like, let's be really clear, right?
No,
It's not
for
safe
sure.
to say anything.
It isn't safe to say anything. You are absolutely correct. And so a lot of people are silenced through fear, but a lot of people are silenced through support. Let's take a look at Australia, for example. That's a free country. They would be able to speak up there if they wanted to. But you had two nurses talking
Right.
about how they kill their Jewish patients. And we had over 60 Muslim organizations. Note, not individuals, organizations. Pretty much every Islamic organization in the country of Australia spoke up in support of these nurses who talked about killing their Jewish patients. So
It's
it's not
crazy.
always about fear. Sometimes it's about actually supporting this genocidal obsession. So yeah, I'm off my soapbox now.
I like you when you're on
Christopher,
the
you good?
soapbox, Yasmine.
Great.
Yeah, I really
Good,
appreciate
Christopher?
everything. I appreciate everything you had to say, Mohammed. Yasmin.
Yasmin.
Uh,
Thank you.
I think you're right in saying that a lot of people probably do have a bias that we're just not allowed to criticize foreign cultures. At the same time, though, I do think a lot of people, they just don't really know a whole lot about the outside world, outside
That's
America.
true too. You're right. And I think that's why they look at Israel and they look at their own history with their what they did in order to colonize America, or yeah, colonize America, what they did to the indigenous people there. And then they just extrapolate from that.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, that must be what happened in Israel. It's like, no, the world, like just lift your head up from your navel for 1 second. Just like, the narcissism is overwhelming. Everything has to fit into their worldview, and it's completely the opposite in Israel. But why would they take the time to learn that? They've already have this little tiny bit of information, and like you said, Selena, they already have their little equation, their Sesame Street level equation: oppressor, oppressed, white,
Right.
brown. So what's
Just
the point of thinking further than that?
just to add to that, Yasmin, which is really interesting, is Israel has been a successful decolonization. That's
Exactly.
certainly been an argument. And this is interesting because I learned this when I was the Minister for Post-Secondary Education. And here in British Columbia, in my province, we just graduated the very first group of Inchillan speakers, which is a native language that has been lost, a First Nations language of people of the Okanagan peoples. And now you can take a degree in that language.
Wow.
And so, which is
Amazing.
great. It's about reviving a language. So I asked the question, how did you do this? Where did you go? And they said, well, we
Hebrew.
went to Israel because they have language scholars, linguists, who have done this before. They built, rebuilt, reclaimed, reignited the language. It was a dead language. And now there are millions who speak this language. And so we went to Israel to learn how to read, how to do this work. And so here we are. We have this juxtaposition of like Israel teaching indigenous peoples how to reclaim, how to reignite, how to rebuild. And the very people who argue against colonization and are dissing Israel and challenging it as oppressor, we're not recognizing the contradiction of what they're doing. And it's like they have this little kernel of information and they apply it wholesale right across the world through very Western eyes. And they're missing the boat. And that's something that we have to grapple with, all of us. And again, it's about being curious and challenging some of these ideas. How did you get there? How did you decide this was the case? How did you decide? What's your evidence? And it can't be Wikipedia, folks. It cannot be Wikipedia
Or TikTok.
or TikTok.
All right, we have a couple more questions, so I will refrain from any more of my rants so that we can hopefully get through both of these questions before our time is up. Sophie, you're next.
Yes, hello, my name is Sophie. I was born and raised in Victoria, and I'm now in Vancouver. Yasmine, your story I heard on Sam Harris' podcast, and it moved me and shook me to the core. Selina, we met very briefly at the synagogue presentation a few months ago with my husband Zane, who's also on this call. Anyways, so my question, as I'm interested in psychology and teaching in general, what would you recommend, Selina, in terms of teaching children in post-secondary or even secondary institutions to be more critical and informed about the world? Because I think that we're really good, at least in BC, at looking at general principles and talking about oppression and historic wrongs. I think that's a good thing to focus on. But when it comes to the actuality of applying these principles to a specific situation in a specific context with a history, it all goes out the window. So do you have any recommendations or certain models or concrete things that post-secondary or secondary institutions can implement?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially in an age when there's so much misinformation and disinformation. We're flooded with information, and it's the first time we have a generation that doesn't have to go to a library to get information. It just comes at them all the time, and they need the critical thinking skills in order to make sure that they are applying it correctly. And so I'm actually going to turn to what I call Jewish inquisitiveness. So Jewish tradition is always about debate. So when the rabbis would make laws or rules, it was never one person over another. They would engage in debate. We are very much a culture that loves debate, loves challenging ideas and pushing the limit on ideas. So nothing is taken for granted. Even I would argue the word of God. Like, did he mean this or did he mean this? Is this supposed to be this way or is it supposed to be that way? So there's this culture of questioning everything. Some would argue it's why you see so many lawyers in the profession or so many therapists in the profession, because we generally don't take things at face value. Even our sacred texts, they get debated all the time. And so how do we transfer that curiosity about the world, inquisitiveness, not taking anything for granted, but asking lots of questions. And then over time, from various sources of input, can you form an opinion? And that, I think, needs to be a direction that we need to go. It's like challenging students. So where did you get that information? How did you know that information was true? How did that inform your opinion? What contradictory opinions did you come across? So it's really challenging people to think very much about a variety of things and putting a little bit of doubt into what they believe to be true so that they're curious to go and better understand it. I think that's really what needs to happen, is helping young people be curious, even when they read it on Wikipedia or they saw it on TikTok. It's like, how do you know that's true? How do you know that's not AI? Like that to me, I don't know, this could be AI. The bear jumping on the trampoline is the latest, with all the rabbits jumping on the trampoline. I'm thinking, you think that's true? I think it's AI. Like, really, just because you see it doesn't mean it's true. So be curious. That's the single piece of advice.
Thank you.
Love it. Just a tiny little note there, Selina. Sarah and I were both insulted with being called Jews when we were growing up because we're critical thinkers, because we were curious kids who would ask questions. So that's how they would silence us, by saying, like, what are you, a Jew? Why are you asking so many questions?
Wow.
So yeah, which is
Wow.
lets you know the kinds of societies that we grew up in, the polar opposite of what you described.
Wow.
Asking
Right.
questions, critical
Oh,
thinking, any
yeah.
kind of thinking is highly discouraged and, in
Yeah.
fact, punished and
Right.
mocked.
Well, because there's
So,
risk. You
yeah.
might not then believe, or you
Hmm.
might leave. And we have a very different, and maybe that's why it is about hating Jews, because we're too
Hmm.
damn curious. We challenge the
Yes.
status quo.
Don't
I've always
listen. You
said,
don't get in
yeah,
line. Yeah. Even
right.
when they killed tribes of you, you still have pride. and you still have your own beliefs and you still stand tall, and that's what they can't handle.
Well, thanks for helping me understand sort of how it is that we're characterized in some of these communities.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this anti-Semitism is very true for the Muslim world, but I see it beyond the Muslim world now too, with this just, almost um, insubordination, like how dare you not stay down? Like
Yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
whole world is against Israel. We just had the Holocaust. And what are you guys doing winning all these Nobel Prizes and, leading the world in technology and medicine and literature and art? Like no. This is like
Or
you need to stay down. You need to be our
how
scapegoat.
dare you fight back for your survival? How dare you
Yeah.
fight back for your
Yeah.
survival? I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know we still have some more questions, and we do have the Yasmine Mohammed community for exactly this purpose because we can never get to all the questions and comments that people have for my amazing guests. And Selina, obviously, there's a lot more people that want to ask you questions, want to speak to you about different things. Can you, first of all, give us your final thoughts, your final advice, any last words for us, and then share with us where people can find you so that they can communicate with you further if they want to?
Thanks, Yasmin. I think it's important that we remain hopeful, which is, curiosity is one, I guess, Jewish requirement, Jewish philosophy, Jewish way of being in the world, but so is hope. We are a hopeful people that things will get better. The Israeli anthem is Hatikva, the hope. We know that the world isn't perfect and that the world is broken and that we all have a responsibility to help heal the world. It's called Tikkun Olam. It's what drove me into politics. It's what's driven everything that I do every day is what can I do today to heal the world just a little bit? And so I want to leave listeners with this notion of what can you do to heal the world just a little bit, whether it comes through kindness or it comes through just care, an act of caring, or it comes through some bigger action that's around holding someone accountable for their anti-Semitism or their hate in some way, that we heal the world with love, not with hate. And so I want to leave listeners with that. You can purchase my book on Amazon or an Audible, Truth Be Told. And you can find me at selinarobinson.ca.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Selina. And I really do want to encourage all of you to pick up this book, not just Canadians. This is information that all of us need to hear across the world right now. As I mentioned, we're on a precipice. This is a very important time in history, and it's very important that we get it right, that we find our courage, that we dig deep and we find our courage. And I always like to bring up the women of Iran because they should be our beacons. They are the ones who show the world that even standing up in front of the IRGC, standing in the Islamic regime of Iran, in the Islamic Republic of Iran, removing their hijabs and burning them in the streets. We're not asking you to be as brave as these women, but look at them as beacons of strength. Look at them and be motivated by them. All we're asking is for you to have a conversation with your friends, with your coworkers, possibly on social media, although be careful there because, don't get pulled in with the crazies, but speak up, right? Join, as Selina was encouraging, join your political groups, join your teachers, PTAs, speak up. Let your voice be heard. I completely agree with every word you said, Selina, and I'm so, so grateful for having you here. And again, I encourage everybody to pick up this book. It is really, really meaningful, especially in the world today. And thank you, Selina, for telling us the truth. It's very, very brave of you. And I know what that's like. And I see you, I hear you, I honor you, and I really, really feel you. And what I didn't mention throughout this whole podcast is that you were going through all of this as you are also battling cancer as well. So you are truly a phenomenal woman. And I'm so grateful for having you on my podcast today. And I hope that everybody goes to your website and starts to support you, definitely picks up your book and learns more about you. Thank you so much, Selina. This is not goodbye. We will work together. We will continue this conversation.
I look forward to it, Yasmine. Thanks again.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us here today. And we'll see you at the next podcast. Bye, everyone.
After hearing all that, you might be left wondering, what can I do? How can I help? Well, this is why I created a nonprofit called Free Hearts, Free Minds. We are the only organization dedicated exclusively to helping these free thinkers. We empower them with our programs and supportive community, lifting them up so they can heal, speak out, and begin to make positive changes, not just in their own lives, but within the broader community around them. If this is a cause that resonates with you and you want to make a difference, one way to do that is by donating to Free Hearts, Free Minds. Because not enough people care about this cause, we need people like you to help fuel this change. You can donate via our website, freeheartsfreeminds.com. Thank you. Every dollar you donate makes a difference.